TNS, not to be confused with TMNT, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for short. I'm Landon, for those of you that are new here to this show, and I'm joined on the screen by fellow color commentator and ACC homer, HP. Are we excited for this matchup?
If it is within 20 points, I will be pretty excited about this one. To be honest with you, we've had plenty of blowouts so far. I think you and Carson had a close game just now, didn't you?
We did. It was a 6-point game. Florida prevailed over Houston 73-67.
And Carson celebrates long into the evening, practicing responsible social distancing while he does it.
Of course. We were 6 feet away the entire time. However, in this matchup, we got a 3-14 between Duke, which, funny enough, is being sponsored right now by Patrick Ewing on the screen, and D-Wade for the Bradley Bears. Interesting. So this should be a good one. I say that facetiously, of course. HP, how bad of a win do you think Duke's going to pull out here?
Well, if it's anything like the other games we've talked about so far, I'm guessing somewhere in the neighborhood of 20. I think there'll be bigger blowouts than U of L and UK's games, even though those were epic blowouts also. So give me Duke by 33 points here, like Kansas yesterday.
I'm going to go Duke by 25.
Close game, I guess, compared to the other ones.
Oh, I guess. I don't know. The Bradley Braves, HP are really known as sleepers, giants, if you will.
Out of the MVC, I think, but honestly, who cares? They're going to get sacrificed to Duke here. Now that I say who cares, they're probably going to win. Virtual Bradley is probably going to win the game here.
I'm just glad that I was able to pry you away from the coronavirus concert. And with that...
Hey, I mean, in-home music performances, I don't think it gets much better than that, honestly.
And with that, we move on to the actual game. HP, who was performing on the concert? Elton John?
To be honest, I started watching, and before I left, I think it was Sam Smith up next, but I didn't see that part.
It's actually not that bad. I would have watched it. I didn't know Sam Smith was on live. That's okay though. Nobody wants to hear about that.
I was gonna make a really bad Cordy joke about you're not the only one, but I feel like the viewers wouldn't appreciate that. I feel like Griffin's already in the comments right now, crushing us for talking about Sam Smith on this
it's gonna
March
happen.
Madness stream.
It's gonna happen. I wouldn't be shocked if I pull up the comment section. It's Griff talking about how overrated Sam Smith is, which is absolute slander.
I mean, let's be honest. We need content to talk about here because I'm sure this game's going to be just as awful as the other ones we've watched so far.
I mean, okay, I do have to find that laughable that Duke on this is a D+ home court advantage.
Well, after all, the crazies are overrated, as they would say.
As a UK fan, I will admit, I actually think Rupp is a tad... I think it's gone downhill in the last few years. It's the blue hair special, essentially. No pun intended, of course.
Well, Duke gets to stop first possession here. Surprise, surprise. Here comes Trey Jones. Trey Jones working in isolation here.
Runner-up ACC Player of the Year, technically, Trey Jones.
But he ended up being ACC Player of the Year.
Hey, but when he's getting contested boards like that, why wasn't he the Player of the Year? HP wasn't good enough for you? It's Cassius Stanley.
Tyus Jones didn't win Player of the Year. I don't think so, right?
No.
Well, Trey Jones and Tyus Jones honestly look like the same person, but...
Yes, they do. And a foul on Cassius Stanley. Oh, no.
I guess, honestly, in theory, Coach K back then could have, done the same thing where, we don't want Okafor to win, so we're going to nominate Tyus Jones instead. Because I think Tyus Jones is first team All-ACC, but I don't know.
Probably. I'm just shocked that Jack White didn't win it.
Yeah, Jack White, exactly.
We gotta set an example.
Who was the guy that ran up to Darius like he was gonna fight him?
Joey Baker.
Joey Baker. Number 41 on the screen there, I believe.
I'm taking Joey Baker Darius Perry 9 times out of 10. And the and one for Wendell Moore.
Yeah, I feel like there's going to be a lot of this from Duke just because you have players like Wendell Moore, Vernon Carey, Cassius Stanley that are so much more athletically talented than this Bradley team, with all due respect to the Braves. I think that's going to be a place where Duke wins this game pretty decisively.
Absolutely. As Kingsby takes it out to the top of the circle. Gets the pick
I can kind of see the player names right now. This is improvement.
Yes, it is. Meanwhile, Bradley might have the best name yet. They have a guy named Koch Bar. Kochbar. That's a very smooth sounding name. Koch Bar. Koch Bar with the layup.
So far, building a small house here. Lots of misses early.
Dude, did you watch the Houston-Florida game Carson and I did before this?
No, if I had time to watch it, I probably would have actually called it. But no, I did not get to watch it. I just saw that Florida won.
Houston shot like 28, not even exaggerating, it was like 28% from the free throw line. And they shot over 20 attempts.
Classic.
I think they were like 10 of 28. No, they were, I think it was worse than that. No, they were like 10 of 31. Koch Bar with the rebound.
I feel like our middle school teams probably would have shot better than that.
I felt like I was watching 2011 UConn Duke. Oh, and the rejection by Vernon Carey. I feel like I was watching UConn UK 2011 all over again. Final Four, not Maui, of course. As Cassius Stanley with the open three, no good. Vernon Carey.
UConn played in Maui in 2011. I really didn't remember that. Woo! There's Vernon Carey.
Vernon Carey with the poster. Yeah, Terrence Jones went like 4 of 13 from the free throw line.
That was back when Terrence Jones was UK's best player at that point in the year, before Brandon Knight kind of ended up filling that role.
No. I'm talking the Final Four game. Not Maui.
You're talking the Final Four game,
yeah. Not Maui. UConn blew out UK in Maui.
For some reason, Cal could never beat Calhoun.
Yeah, I know. It was weird as Cassius Stanley cuts for the dunk. Timeout to Bradley. HP, this 40-point...
Take a picture, guys. This is as close as it's going to get with me and Landon calling the game.
This 40-point demolition's probably going to happen.
Well, I've really got nothing so far, to be honest with you. This is very poor commentary, but I mean...
It's not so much poor commentary as a poor 3-14 matchup.
Yeah. A lot of these kind of upset-y kind of games, usually you don't think of like a 3-14 as much of an upset game. These kinds of games are certainly not all created equal. Sometimes you get Bradley just hit a 3 there, so they're finally off 1 point.
More importantly, though, HP, guess who's listening supposedly to this podcast? CPD. You heard that right. CPD is apparently listening. As Cassius with the dunk. I sent him the link.
Well, I mean, honestly, I do kind of have a bone to pick with Cameron, because I did see his tweet about how Highmark Stadium was the best soccer stadium he'd attended. That not being Slugger Field is like grounds for treason, frankly.
What's wrong with you? Cameron, defend yourself if you're truly listening to this episode. Defend yourself.
Allegedly. I mean, why
Allegedly.
I guess you could, in theory, subscribe to being entertained by 50-point blowouts. I mean, for God's sake, if we watched an 8-9 game that would have tied for the second biggest margin of victory in the history of college basketball tournament... College basketball
Bradley tries to put up a shot. Rebound. Childs with the putback. Bradley not going away just yet.
Yeah, not quite yet.
Not quite yet.
I think Hutch and Huber got yet another upset today.
Which one? They had
No, that's my mistake. I don't think they got an upset today, actually. I think today's been pretty chalky, I think.
Stephen F. Austin
followed it.
Stephen F. Austin was in Auburn was an upset today.
Yeah, that was Griffin and Reese. I did watch a little bit of that one.
Wisconsin-Akron was probably the best game of the bracket so far. It was absolutely amazing. As Brown gets to the top of the key, Koch Bar out to Kingsby. Kingsby out to Brown at the top of the key with the 3. And he got it! HP Bradley's not going away right now. They're on an 8-0 run in the last minute.
Bradley's in the lead. Take a picture, folks.
Scrapbook.
Since Carson is listening, Carson, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much money did Adidas pay you to work for U of L? Like under the table, though, like Adidas scandal kind of money.
As Vernon Carey silences HP's doubts with the layup. He may not even be listening with the sound on HP. That's the thing.
No, that's a great point. Honestly, I just see Carson's the only one in the live chat right now.
That's not true. We have a few
I'm
people.
also watching on my phone here just to see what the live comments were, but yeah, a little disappointing thus far, to be honest.
Well,
we need more comedy, honestly, because these games are certainly not providing it.
To be fair,
I guess
Bradley.
In theory, they could be providing it.
Well, to be fair, Bradley.
Arizona won by 44 yesterday.
Bradley is winning right now, 9-8. As Cassius Stanley drives to the cup, rejected by Coke Bar. It's such a great name, Coke Bar. Cassius Stanley already 1 for 5 from the field. They get it down to Brown. Brown hacked by Jack White. Like a Jason horror movie right there. Yeah, HP, CPD has not defended himself in the group chat for that comment.
Well, that's fair, honestly. That's an indefensible position, so you might as well ignore the question at this point.
Fair enough. Matthew Hurt checks into the game. Speculation is, if we're actually talking real life here, that he might be transferring out of Duke after losing his starting spot in the rotation by the end of the year.
Matthew Hurt was kind of like a very weird kind of presence in the lineup for Duke. As Vernon Carey scores again, he's really been the main man for Duke thus far. When you look at Matthew Hurt, there were games where he did very, very well, especially from three-point range, but a lot of times there was a lot of complaints from Duke's fan base about him giving back just as many points as he scored off some not great defense, to be honest. Matthew Hurt was a very, very highly rated 5-star recruit. It would be interesting to see where he ends up going to. He could go home to Minnesota. That was a speculated destination early on in his recruitment.
No, HP, no.
He does have some significant Louisville ties, although because he is an in-conference player, I would very much doubt that move would be possible. You could see maybe I'm not sure UK would be much of a player for him at this point. Just given the players UK has coming back and coming in, I guess UK could be an option, but I do kind of doubt it there at least.
Yeah, I don't think. No, I doubt it. As Vernon Carey goes up, and he's fouled. No, Matthew Hurt, if we're talking UK kind of stuff, or just talking about UK in general, Matthew Hurt reminds me a lot of Scal. Very talented shooters that just happen to be over 6'8". I think Matthew Hurt's 6'9". Scal was 6'10".
I don't see much of Scal in Matthew Hurt.
Well,
I think his game is.
Well, hold up though.
Scal still genuinely was like a center kind of player, I guess. Whereas Matthew Hurt, I would say more might fill the role of
power forward.
I don't know. His game kind of makes me think of something more along the lines of, say, like a Vernon Carey absolutely finishes in traffic over Bradley there.
But the issues with Scal, I think, are the same with Matthew Hurt. They're good shooters, but they're too thin. They haven't put on enough muscle, and they get bullied around on the defensive end. And that's why I think Scal hasn't been able to translate the high school success, being the number 1 recruit in 2016, to anything professional or even at college.
Well, with Matthew Hurt, I think he's asked to defend out on the perimeter more than Scal was at UK.
Yes.
Scal was honestly one of the weirdest Calipari recruits ever because he was I believe he was the number 2 overall recruit. Did not really play well for the entirety of his freshman season. And then I think he was a little bit. I think he's been a better pro than he was a college player thus far. But also, I don't know. I feel like I remember Terry being very disappointed in Scal at UK.
Terry?
Terry. I don't know why. Maybe I'm thinking of someone else, but I'm not for certain.
Oh my gosh! HP bench warmers in the game for Bradley. Let's go. This is exactly the content we need. As Brown takes another 3, no good. No, it's Scal. This is the one time I'll talk about Calipari's, I think, failing from a coaching perspective. And it's what worries me about E.J. Montgomery, too, with how he's trying to use E.J., even though I think E.J.'s skill set in that sense is better than Scal's for back-to-the-basket. But he tried making Scal a back-to-the-basket player, and clearly that's just not his skill set. So he wasted all of this talent and this finesse in this jump shooting ability that Scal had. Like, he could step it out from 3, which I think would have been a major component that Cal hadn't seen up until, Anthony Davis could by the end of the year.
For some reason, Cal has been, incredibly committed to having, incredible, size, even though I'm not certain that, the size that he's putting out on the court complements
Mm-hmm.
everyone the best. EJ and Nick Richards, they can play together. I'm just not sure that I mean, they're more play like two centers on the court together, and Cal's kind of tended to do that over the years.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of one thing I've disagreed with him on. Even yes, me Louisville fan disagreeing with
Oh
Cal's if I
my
was a
goodness.
fan.
No, I agree. I agree with you on that. I'm surprised they haven't seen him adapt as much. I mean, it's kind of been similar to his Memphis and UMass offense. He favors long athletic players over shooters. And I know you talked about how you don't necessarily agree with the trend of trying to match, say the Warriors or whatever, but that's the college landscape now. As Henry takes the three, no good. Oh, and the putback, does it go for Bradley? Did he beat the buzzer? I don't think he did. He did not beat the buzzer. But HP, no, I agree though. I feel like if UK and Calipari is one of the best ever to do it. I mean, I wouldn't put him in a top five, maybe probably not even a top 10, but like he's one of the best to ever do it, obviously. But
Well, he's a Hall of Fame coach, so I
yeah,
mean, yes.
oh, of course. So it's just I'm surprised that you haven't seen him adapt. But he's stubborn about some things. It took them forever this year to finally go into his zone, even with limited depth. And he's talked about his reluctance to use that. So it'll be interesting. But or Jordan Goldwire for three, and he got it. But
Goldwire, usually more of a defensive player for Duke, doesn't really get a whole lot of shots up at times. Usually
absolutely
utilized more for his defensive abilities. Hits a three there.
Yeah, but I think going back to the Matthew Hurt, and that's just thrown away like a Jameis Winston pass. I think it'll be interesting to see if yes, of course, if Matthew Hurt does transfer where he goes. It's not confirmed that he will. It's just one of those. It could happen, especially considering Duke is still bringing in a pretty solid class next year, to say the least.
I feel like Matthew Hurt would thrive in a conference, and there's another and one for Duke. Is Jordan that Cassius Stanley?
It's Jordan Goldwire.
I have no idea. I can't see who the players
Jordan Goldwire and Joey Baker.
Again, wow.
Joey Baker high fives himself because Goldwire refuses to. No joke.
I'm not sure there's anything more pointless than me trying to commentate on this game where I cannot see the score and I cannot see who the players are when the camera's on like default mode here.
We need
I can kind of see Goldwire's name there, but
we need your ACC knowledge, HP.
I feel like Matthew Hurt would honestly be better in a conference like the Big Ten, where there's, I wouldn't say less athleticism, but it's a slower pace of game than the ACC, generally speaking. The ACC, when you look at a lot of the teams in the conference, you can find teams like Duke and Louisville that tend to be a little bit more heavy on isolation type plays. I believe Louisville is one of the top teams in the country, actually, in terms of percentages of isolations run this year. But I think, honestly, that Matthew Hurt might be a better fit in the Big Ten. He strikes me as much more of a half-court kind of player, at least, in comparison to, what Duke, generally speaking, is trying to do. Because, I mean, let's be honest here. When you have players like Trey Jones and Cassius Stanley and Vernon Carey, Wendell Moore, and others, it's hard for me to kind of look at that team and see Matthew Hurt as a great fit in that lineup. When you look at Duke, they run very simple sets. They aren't very complicated because of the fact that, Coach K is getting top 5, 10 players every single year to come to Duke. And when you do that, generally speaking, under the guise of we're going to get you to the NBA, your stuff is usually not going to be super duper complex, which is honestly fine. And honestly, I feel like a lot of times college basketball is one of the most overcoached sports there is, so there's really not any need to be complicated if it doesn't need to be. But, I just kind of struggle sometimes with Matthew Hurt, how he would fit into that Duke lineup, I guess, and especially with how he struggles defensively at times also. I think Matthew Hurt, the best I could see maybe a Minnesota or a Wisconsin-type team landing him if he does choose to transfer, but we'll have to see where the chips fall.
Absolutely. Is Bradley still somehow in this game after the Duke turnover, 20-16?
Bradley's hanging around here.
They are. You imagine all the Duke fans if Bradley pulls off this upset. Boy, with the rebound, the backup center for Bradley, out to Thomas. Out to Childs. Childs at the elbow. And the jumper, no good. Rebound out to Joey Baker. Out to Goldwire. Joey Baker's provided some valuable minutes for Duke this year. Very much a 3-and-D guy, but he's expanded his game a lot. Jordan Goldwire, speaking of expanded games, rebound out to DeLaurier. DeLaurier's hacked by Henry
Man,
after
it feels
the
like Jevon DeLaurier's been at Duke for about a decade now.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does, HP. Remember Perry Ellis for Kansas?
Oh, man. Well, Perry Ellis also looked like he was about 40 years old at the time. So, I mean, I guess that would make sense, too.
Perry Ellis, dude, was 195 years old. As DeLaurier steps up to the line for the first. No good. Brick City again. Oh no, HB, speaking of content, guess who's Calipari is growing a beard right now.
Well, I mean, this is coronavirus simulation basketball content. I mean, I think that's about as good as it's going to get for us at this point as far as things to talk about.
Oh, cool. UK picked up a recruit today. They picked up Isaac DeGregorio, who is a walk-on. Who the heck did he play for? Well, he's a practice player, so that's cool, I guess, as Bradley gets the turnover. Thomas out and running with a contested layup. No good. Rebound out to DeLaurier. Jones, ACC Player of the Year. Trey Jones out to White. HP, what are your thoughts on Trey Jones as an NBA player? What do you think his floor is, and what do you think his ceiling is?
You know, when I look at someone like Trey Jones, it is kind of him and Tyus, they play pretty similarly, honestly, when you look at Tyus back in 2015 and Trey Jones now for Duke. You know, Trey Jones has relatively average athleticism. He's a dog on defense, so he plays really, really hard, averaging, a significant number of steals per game every year. When you look at Trey Jones, he's really made a reputation as being one of the best defensive guards in the country. I think that is something he can bring to the NBA pretty reasonably well. Trey Jones, I don't really see him as much of a scorer, but I do think that Trey Jones is a cerebral basketball player that would be able to do well. Starting out in the NBA, he would likely be a point guard off the bench for a team as he kind of grows into more of a role as he goes along. So I could see Trey Jones as kind of a late first-round pick. Maybe he could fall into the second round. I do think Trey Jones would be a first-round pick, though, if the draft was today, especially given that the coronavirus will more than likely keep players from working out and doing interviews with NBA teams. So I feel like mid-late first round is probably where Trey Jones will end up going. I do like him as a prospect, though. He does a few things pretty well. He improved his shot from last year for sure. Last year there were games, especially in the tournament, I remember teams doing this, where they wouldn't even guard Trey Jones. And sometimes when he was unguarded, he wouldn't even shoot or try to shoot it. Now, and granted, he was on a roster with Zion Williamson, R.J. Barrett, and Cam Reddish. So, I mean, that's understandable why people would be all in on stopping those three guys. But I do see Trey Jones as kind of someone who can quarterback the second unit early on in his NBA career, especially work as being a very defensive-minded point guard that knows his role well. I do like Trey Jones, though, especially, coming off the bench, leading the second unit as a point guard. What do you think of Trey?
I like Trey. The one issue for me is he gets blocked there, is the offensive production. From a defensive standpoint, he's one of the best, if not the best, on-ball defender in the country. Obviously, that's never been the knock on him. It's about his consistent production on the offensive side, which I think he improved on a lot this year, obviously. But how that translates to the professional level, I don't know. Because when you look at his brother, Tyus, who same skill set, he's been able to carve out a solid bench role
Yeah,
niche.
we gotta stop comparing Trey and Tyus Jones because they are two different people. But
They are, but their
yes,
gameplay,
continue.
but their styles are very similar.
They
Obviously,
do play a similar kind of basketball. That is true.
yes. And while I think Trey is a little bit more talented than Tyus, that's why I use the comparison. But I think he will be a solid NBA player. I don't think anywhere along the lines of a Damian Lillard or an All Star point guard, but somebody that could be fairly consistent. I think the
I kind
one.
of think we should note though. He did improve his 3-point
Mhm.
shooting percentage this year to 36%, which is pretty good, honestly,
Yeah.
especially when he was hovering down around I think it was 20-25% last year. So I do think that's a pretty good thing that teams are going to like to see. When he has the opportunity this year, he has shown to be able to hit jump shots in addition to play good defense also. So I think that is something that Trey Jones showed a good amount of this year to kind of help ease concerns about his offensive consistency.
Right. I can see him having an Andre Miller kind of career, just where solid floor general. Andre Miller was a guy, he shot pretty well in the early part of his career. Wasn't really known as a shooter by the end of it, but somebody that solid three, not 3-and-D guy, but a solid defender that really had great court vision. I think that's one unsung part about Trey Jones' game, even though he is sometimes lost for a quick turnover spree, if you will, where he goes on a little run where he's making some ill-advised decisions. I think for the most part, though, he'll be able to carve out a pretty solid role in the NBA. I don't have any doubt about that. With all my Duke partisan aside, I think Trey Jones will be just fine.
Wait, has Tyrese declared for the draft yet?
Actually, no, but Calipari just announced yesterday as Wendell Moore gets fouled that all 5 starters have put their name in the draft, but are testing the waters.
I mean, as you'd expect, there's really no reason not to at this point. Well, actually, there actually could be reason not to because I doubt there's going to be any workouts this year. What do you think, Tyrese Maxey or Tyrese Halliburton? And I mainly say that because I'm looking at a mock draft. Their names are both Tyrese, and they are both point guards.
Give me Tyrese Maxey, and I'll explain why. Just because Halliburton's somebody that came on really late. With Maxey, he's had this sustained level for a few years now, even in high school. Halliburton's a guy. There's still some question marks around him. I think he's been great for Steve Prohm at Iowa State. But if I'm taking all bias aside, I think outside of the length. And while Maxey can be a consistent, he's the guy that's perfect under the NBA lights because he's such a big game player. As Brown lines up for 3 and misses, for me it would be Maxey. But I'd like to hear the argument for Halliburton because he's a guy that has a lot of question marks, but is somebody that is obviously very talented and is a great fit in today's NBA.
Yeah, I do kind of get concerned sometimes when you see a good player like Tyrese Halliburton just on an awful team because Iowa State was that bad this year, 12-20 on the season. I do kind of get concerned about that, how much of the stats, how much of the performance was just because there was nobody else out there. I did kind of feel the same way when I was actually, it has kind of been a trend in recent years when you really think about it, how many very highly rated NBA prospects have been on just god-awful college teams like Ben Simmons on LSU. But that's because of Ben Simmons. I don't think he's terribly concerned about winning, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
But Markelle Fultz, that's another one who's just on an awful team. A bunch of guys in the SEC, really. Anthony Edwards is another one this year.
Yep.
I don't know. Getting Landon talking about Ben Simmons, that's that's a rabbit hole that could go on for hours. And Landon crushing Ben Simmons.
It's not that I don't think he's a good player. I just think he's overrated in the sense that he's a let me put it this way: as Wendell Moore gets murdered, but they call the foul on him. I think Ben Simmons is his lack of a jumper is a great disservice to the 76ers. If he could develop a 3-point shot, can you imagine how much more that would add to that team? Just that shot alone.
Better than Giannis if he had a 3-point shot.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that.
I don't know. I feel like Ben Simmons, as far as basketball skills, I feel like he's, Giannis. A lot of Giannis's game is the fact that he's just such a freak athlete. Because of the fact that Giannis is, 6'11", strong, can jump out of the gym, all of that. he was able to, to see such a mismatch against 99% of basketball. Last year, he kind of, I don't want to say he got exposed in the Eastern Conference Finals, because it was the Eastern Conference Finals, by the Raptors throwing Kawhi Leonard, Pascal Siakam, etc. And he really struggled to get anything going when those guys were able to form a box around the paint here. But I think maybe me comparing him to Giannis with Ben Simmons at a jumper might be a little bit too much. Mm-hmm. But also, I do think that Ben Simmons, he does have special abilities as far as playmaking on the ball that I think I'm not sure anyone else in the NBA really has at this point with his same physical gifts, I should say there. Obviously, LeBron at this point would be people have actually compared Ben Simmons to LeBron if he could get a jump shot, but I think that might be a little bit excessive. But also, then again, I'm kind of all over the place on this point, so I don't know.
No, I totally get that. As Griffin chants, "Come on, Duke, let's go, Duke, let's go, Duke," as they are up 34-22.
Let's go, Duke, as Coach K said so eloquently.
Yes. And Duke up at the half, 34-22.
Well, not a total blowout yet, but I feel like we're kind of trending that way.
Yeah, I feel like we say that now, it's just going to get out of hand. HP, I thought you'd find this interesting, but I think UK might be going the U of L route here with grad school if IQ and Nick Richards leave. Because right now, I don't feel too great about Greg Brown. I think Paolo Banchero is going to stay in the 2021 class. Even though Devin Askew made it official, he's reclassifying. And after that, there really aren't any recruits in the 2020 class. So, sorry, I guess. I don't know.
I have no comment on this. Grad transfers are good, I guess. Rick Pitino perfected the done-in-one system in college basketball with Lee and Lewis.
The done-in-one. I've actually never heard you say that. System. Can we trademark that? Have you ever heard that before?
I'm definitely not the first person that said that, though, unfortunately, so...
Dang it. I was about to say, we gotta trademark that if that's the case. I've actually never...
Halftime Entertainment, Landon will sing an a cappella cover of the Weeknd smash hit Blinding Lights, because this game's gonna end up a 30-point blowout.
Have you listened to the album yet?
I've heard a little bit of it, mostly the kind of stuff that gets played on the radio, but I haven't really heard the whole thing. I've heard it's gotten pretty good reviews, though.
I think it might be his best album. Then again, I like the 80s. Oh, Brown with the Steel. I like 80s synth. And for me, that's what the album a lot of it is.
This is it's definitely a very different sound from The Weeknd, honestly, than his last album. I wish I had the name of it in front of me, but I did not anticipate we'd be talking about The Weeknd right now and his newest album.
Starboy.
On the Neutral Site podcast,
yes, of course.
March Madness.
We can be a little varied on this show. No, Starboy was good. I like Starboy. It's actually, I got it in my car. It's a good album, especially, I liked it with the production with Daft Punk. But HP, highly recommend the song After Hours, the title song. Fantastic, as is In Your Eyes. But that's beside the point. Coach K's favorite singer, The Weeknd, will not be covered anymore on this show. So as long as Bradley is still in this game, which they are. They're up 10 with 18:57 left to go in the game, and Cassius Stanley's fouled. Yeah, HP, we talk a lot of random stuff on here, but I didn't think The Weeknd was going to be mentioned. So I'm glad to know we've gone down.
Certainly worse things we could be talking about on here, like the games tomorrow.
That's true. Yeah, tomorrow's games are, we start classes tomorrow for good old Hanover College. And tomorrow's...
Yeah, but they are online classes, so, I mean, how bad can it be?
I don't know how organized everyone is with all of that, if you know what I mean. Like, basically, they just threw the itinerary together and said, "Here you go."
Well, I mean, when you look at like online classes, I'm talking about online classes like I'm talking about analyzing players right now. But honestly, I don't know. It's going to be kind of funny because I think a lot of people are going to like totally blow off the online classes because that kind of tends to happen.
Ooh.
When who was that? Was that God? I don't know who the players are.
I think it was Vernon Carey with the dunk. Vernon Carey there with a dunk. And Moore with the rebound.
Yes, I can't tell who Vernon Carey is. Fantastic.
Trey Jones with the fadeaway three and bullseye.
Trey Jones says, "Shut up, Landon. I'm going to be a lottery pick."
Hey, I said that the man can play. I just think he's a little bit overrated from the media reports and media. I will call it media bias of him. Oh, Jack White with the block. Yeah, actually, if we're being honest, Trey Jones and Ashton Hagans are very similar, but Trey has a.
Okay, that Coach K design's hilarious.
You know who it looks like? Vinny Del Negro. Vinny Del Negro.
Oh, that's pretty good actually. That's an obscure reference. I wouldn't have got that one.
No, Trey is a better shooting Ashton Hagans in my opinion. Which, I'd love to have a better shooting Ashton Hagans, but I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, HB. I think Ashton's going to leave. I think IQ maybe could come back. I don't know.
Oh yeah, we're talking about UK again. I feel like we've had like 3 hours dedicated to UK on
guess what? We're going to go back to Duke, much to my chagrin, as Cassius Stanley gets the rebound. HB, once I go down that rabbit hole, it's hard to get out of it. So thank you for taking me out of the rabbit hole as Jack White catches the ball at the top of the wing.
So far, topics that have come up include the weekend Sam Smith, some random UK grad transfer they're in on, like about an hour diatribe on Trey Jones. Is Ben Simmons better than Giannis? We're into some really good stuff here.
You forgot about Cameron Pedro Drummond soccer stadiums.
Yes. Talking about Highmark Stadium compared to Louisville Slugger Field.
As Coke Barr with the layup there. Bradley only down 15. Shockingly enough, only down 15.
Where is this game at? Is this in the Greensboro arena, or did they get shipped to Sacramento randomly?
Yep, it says that, but at the top of the key the Bradley bench, it says Madison Square Garden.
Yes, the great MSG first round tournament venue.
Of course. Knockoffs. Vernon Carey goes up strong with the layup.
We shouldn't have simulated this. We should have had me, you, Griffin, and Jared throw on jerseys and play like a 4-on-4 with some randos at the Y to determine who wins the NCAA tournament.
Let's just start doing that. Forget the simulations. Let's just do it. Can you imagine how chaotic that would be?
Yeah, it would be quite chaotic, I have to say. Have you ever thought about the fact that I'm commentating a game that I cannot see who's who and I do not know what the score is?
Have you ever thought about running into Shane Behannon at the Y in a pickup game?
Man, honestly, Shane Behannon, I feel like every couple months, Shane Behannon emerges, and there's always some story about, him getting into trouble, and I just, I don't know. I wish Shane Behannon could have made it to the NBA, honestly, especially in today's NBA, had he been able to stay out of trouble, but it's a reminder of, I guess, the fact that you do indeed have to, actually make, good decisions to go to the NBA.
I wanted Shane Behannon so badly when UK was recruiting him, and then, yeah.
Yes, when we were in 7th grade, the great 2011 recruiting class, I think. That was the class for Rick, actually. I do remember that.
That was
everyone was talking about how Blackshear and Behannon were gonna send own the upperclassmen dorks on the roster and send them all to the bench. We were gonna start 5 freshmen.
Was that the Wayne? That was the Wayne Blackshear class, right?
Yeah, that was Behannon, Blackshear. I want to say Zach Price was in it too. Kevin Ware, that one guy who ended up transferring.
Angel Nunez.
Yeah, Angel Nunez.
Dude, that was over 8 years ago. That's insane.
I know. That's kind of ridiculous. I feel old now.
Jeez. I remember watching the Wayne Blackshear recruitment was one of the first ones I remember watching.
I want to say Wayne committed on Christmas Day or something like that.
Ooh, the good take by Henry. What was the first recruiting class you ever got deep into? Or not class, but the first recruiting battle.
The first recruiting saga that I ever followed. That's a pretty good one. I feel like I didn't really follow any of the guys that actually committed. I remember listening to radio though back in the day, and there would be the constant updates on Marcus Teague.
Yep.
That was like a. I think everyone was convinced that U of L was going to get Teague just because, like, Teague was like a ball. I want to say Teague was like a ball boy for like some of Rick's old UK teams or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he ended up going. He ended up choosing UK at the last moment. Some other ones that I remember that were pretty heavily covered was well, we get to bring in IU for this one. Trey Lyles was a pretty noteworthy recruiting
Mm-hmm.
story for quite a while. Trey Lyles, who committed to IU pretty early on, eventually realized he would be playing for Tom Crean, and then he decommitted. And before eventually, UK seemed to be the team that would get him for a long time, but Rick did make it pretty interesting there at the end, and before he ended up committing to UK.
Right.
I'm trying to think of any other like big recruiting stories. Really most of like the Rick versus Cal recruiting stories, which were like the ones were like way back when I was like an underclassman in high school or like in middle school, and like you kind of just followed back in those points. You would kind of like it would be like what you would like turn on the radio or turn on TV and like see him listening to or talking about, and like so that was kind of how I like learned about recruiting for the first time. I'm kind of ashamed to say that I don't have much to say about U of L's recruits this year besides that Jay Scrubb is good.
The first recruits, yeah, if Jay Scrubb comes back to Louisville, that's just going to be lethal for the Cardinals.
It's crazy though to think about like how like coverage of all this stuff has changed over the years though, because now with social media being so big now as compared to how it was back then, Zion Williamson, I think he had like 1 million followers on Twitter before he even got to Duke, which is like amazing.
The first recruiting battle I remember, there were two of them. The first one he didn't even go to UK, and that would have been around 2009, 2010. That was Xavier Henry. Remember Xavier Henry, number one recruit?
I felt like for some reason I always associated like Josh Selby as the big like Cal Kansas recruiting battle, but maybe that's just me.
Yeah, he would be up there. I would actually say Wiggins, maybe more than Selby, just because Selby's kind of faded away. Wiggins is still.
Wiggins was one of those guys who was he was a recruit in like the age of Twitter, I guess. So Wiggins had this really public kind of recruiting thing. It was really interesting to follow Andrew Wiggins. I think what was his class? He was like a 2014 guy or
14.
Something like that.
Yep.
A 14 guy, so he was like 2 years older than us then. It was interesting back when the media covered Wiggins' recruitment, and I remember like ESPN talked about it a lot way back at that point about like what Andrew Wiggins would do because he played his cards so close to the vest that nobody really ever knew what Andrew Wiggins was actually going to do. So I remember when on the day of his like commitment, I was looking at I think it was 24/7 was like pretty. I don't know how established they were at that point, but they were, I looked at the recruiting website that day, and they were talking about how, there were 4 schools on his list, which I believe were Florida State, Kansas, Kentucky. I think the last one was North Carolina. Am I correct on that?
I think you are. I just remember those 3 schools, though, because I remember North Carolina wasn't getting much, or whoever that 4th school was.
And I remember because that was one of the very, like, weird points where like all of his like recruiting schools were basically even at that point, and really nobody had any idea what he was going to do. There was a lot of talk about Florida State because of I believe his parents played basketball there.
Yep.
And before he did eventually choose Kansas, I do think there was kind of a cool story that came out of this though. When Andrew Wiggins chose Kansas, there was a beat writer for his high school team, or like a local high school sports writer in West Virginia. That covered his recruitment. I thought this was really, really cool because Andrew Wiggins, I remember he announced his college choice at I think it was like his team banquet or something like that. It was a really, really, low-key, very like average high school sports team kind of event. And there was only one media member invited to the like kind of the press conference where he announced where he was going to school, and it was that guy who covered local Huntington area high school sports and had covered their team for the entire year. So he got to be the one to announce on Twitter where Andrew Wiggins was going to school. And Andrew Wiggins was one of the most hyped recruits that I can remember in my lifetime, at least. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and the other one that really Xavier Henry was a guy like number one recruit in the 2009 class, had committed to Memphis. A lot of people thought he was going to follow Calipari to Kentucky. I remember being really involved with, not involved obviously, but seeing that, and that was the first one I paid attention to because, I wasn't familiar with, believe it or not, who Eric Bledsoe was, who DeMarcus Cousins was, who John Wall was. I wasn't even 11 at that point, so like I just wasn't old enough. Now the next year after that, as Bradley almost hits the 3-pointer
Almost
there.
made it.
The
We almost got a shade of exciting basketball there.
the recruitment that still to this day, that is the most I've ever gotten involved with a single recruitment was Terrence Jones, because that was the first one for me. I remember when he
that was a weird recruitment. Terrence Jones' recruitment was.
I remember watching the live stream of when he committed to Washington. I remember following Cat's Paws. Cat's Paws people are crazy. Not, but
yeah, message boards are generally speaking quite invested. I will say in their teams.
Yeah, I remember going there, and there were all these sources and all these people that were saying, well, he called Calipari right after and said he thinks he made the wrong decision, that he was going to reopen his recruitment. And I remember waking up.
That actually turned out to be real.
Yeah, I know. He ended up. I remember one morning. It would have been late in May because he made his decision very, very late. I remember waking up one morning in May, and this is when ESPN still used to do like their little page. They had they called it an update page, and on the right hand side, it would show every single update that happened that day. And he said that he was going to make his announcement at 11 o'clock Eastern or whatever, so 8 o'clock Pacific time or whatever. And he ended up choosing UK, and I remember reading that the next day, and still to this day, that's the most invested I've ever gotten into a recruit. Say after that, I don't know. I don't know after that. Maybe no, because I can't think of anything as tight or competitive as that. Not even the Kevin Knox saga, but Louisville's had some pretty tight ones as Jack White throws up a three that we finally talk about Duke again. But yeah, I mean, yeah, Duke. Now the one that, speaking of Duke, the one that was crazy to me, remember Marquise Bolden?
Yeah, I do. Whatever happened to him?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. I thought this was going somewhere.
Well, I remember how crazy that recruitment was because there were everyone, between Duke and UK. It was a giant tug.
Thonmaker. I want to talk about Thonmaker's recruitment.
What recruitment? That's the craziest recruitment I've ever seen in my life. Also, Marquise Bolden plays for the Cleveland's D-League team.
Oh, okay.
Better than the Turkmenistan League, I guess. I don't know.
The Thonmaker recruitment was hilarious because it was it definitely seemed
shady.
There was some weird turns in that. Arizona State was one. The old Hoopers, Indiana, was involved in that one too. I don't think UK was ever really that involved with Thonmaker's recruitment.
No, a lot of people wanted him to, but it's there were allegations that he was 26 or whatever it was. He was a.
Yeah, I do remember that. What country did Thonmaker come from before he came to the United States?
Wasn't it Australia?
I wasn't for certain where he. I wasn't for sure what his birth country was or where he played basketball at before he came to play in
South
the
Sudan.
United States, but
South Sudan. He went from South Sudan.
Okay. So he was okay.
Yeah, and then he went to Australia.
It is interesting. There was actually on 60 Minutes today. There was a segment about African-born players who ended up making it to the NBA and college basketball too, and about how a lot of players they get sold kind of a false bag of goods by various people in America that want to have them come over and play basketball here. Mm-hmm. They attempted to interview a guy, one of the con artists, I guess, who has apparently swindled players or by making promises of NBA riches, education, whatnot. But I don't know. That was an interesting interesting thing that was on TV today, at least.
I actually would have watched that. I didn't know they had that.
Yeah, it was after, of course, the arbitrary, coronavirus segment, and there was another segment too about a motivational speaker. But I don't know. I thought it was kind of pertinent. I didn't actually get to watch it, unfortunately, but I only got to watch part of it.
Yeah, I would. That's interesting. I would have definitely watched that. But no, I think it has a lot to do. I mean, obviously, it's the chance of making millions of dollars coming from I mean, like I remember Thon Maker's family, that whole situation. It was a very, very poor. I mean, Thon Maker's family, very poor family in South Sudan. Obviously, if you're a talented basketball player, you can make millions of dollars. Unfortunately, fell in with the wrong people, and not Thon, of course, but the handlers, obviously, as Trey Jones gets fouled there. I think Scalabissiere was the same way. There was a lot of issues with him, with his handler, when he was in Haiti.
What do you mean handler? Or who was his like? Are you was it like a coach or like a family friend or something like that?
It was his guardian.
Okay.
Yeah, his guardian who, and that's the thing. Half the time, it's like these. You talk about it, they get taken advantage of because their guardians not only want money, but that puts their eligibility at stake. And these 17, 18-year-old kids can't do anything about that.
Right, yeah. I do honestly, yeah, recruiting has definitely changed, especially ever since, the 2017 pay-for-play quote-unquote scandal. I mean, it was a scandal then, but I think most of the general public's kind of forgot about it by now. But,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough thing to, it'd be incredibly hard for like a 17-year-old kid to handle, especially because, a lot of times, if someone, for example, if you were someone who needed the money and someone offered you, X amount of money to play at, whatever company's school that you were looking at, it'd be pretty darn hard to turn that down, especially. And I think a lot of times players can have a lot of people kind of maybe advising them poorly.
Right.
Maybe not necessarily during recruiting, but especially during college years, maybe by advising them to go pro or whatever, or taking up issues with the coaches in like certain ways that aren't necessarily productive at all. I don't know. I can't remember a ton of stories like that at U of L for the most part, because I don't really remember there being a lot of those types of situations. Although I'm sure that they do happen, obviously, in college sports. But I don't know. Recruiting, it's such a very, very weird thing. Honestly, it's very the rules of the NCAA are changing right before our eyes right now. It's going to be. It's definitely fundamentally changed with social media and the commercialization of college basketball over the last, however many decades. So,
Absolutely. Well, HP, we've pretty much been able to distract ourselves from this Duke 19-point lead with
yeah,
5 to go.
Yeah, we have, but
well, the 5 people listening enjoyed it. Oh my gosh, Vernon Carey just double hand spiked it.
Yeah, Vernon Carey spiked that into the third row.
Now that leads me to my next question, kind of going off the Trey Jones question from earlier. Where do you see Vernon Carey's ceiling in the NBA?
I actually think Vernon Carey is actually a better. I do really actually believe Vernon Carey is a much better prospect than he's getting credit for. There's been a lot of mocks that have him going like a late first round, but I really think Vernon Carey is a great center, regardless of what the quote-unquote the modern NBA says about what a team should be necessarily, because Vernon Carey can do just about everything. He can play good defense. He obviously he has a jump shot. He can score back to the basket. Now, obviously, there are concerns about things like his mobility. How well he can be defensive in an NBA that will often spread bigs to the perimeter, amongst other things. But I do think Vernon Carey, being currently gauged as kind of more of like a late first-round pick, is being quite severely underrated, especially in context where there being a lot of players that just flat out weren't that productive in college,
right?
Being relatively high draft prospects this year, I guess.
I agree.
I think Vernon Carey's way underrated personally. He was awesome this year.
I agree. I don't understand. I get why there are knocks on him. I think his durability, not from an injury standpoint, but so much from a conditioning standpoint.
Yeah, he's just like one of those guys. He's just a big dude.
Kind of like the Udoka Azubuike build.
Right.
Big guys, huge body players. Not a ton of shooting touch, but then again, Vernon Carey hasn't been asked to do that at Duke. Vernon Carey reminds me a lot of Jahlil Okafor. for the right reasons. I don't think motivation or taking plays off has ever been an issue for Carey. He plays with a chip on his shoulder. But from like a player comparison standpoint, I see a lot of Jahlil Okafor, and I can't believe I'm saying this. I think Jahlil Okafor was kind of screwed over from a lot of NBA teams because of that new change to the NBA landscape. The Warriors.
I think Okafor kind of had some problems like fitting in with the team and
yeah, hence
in
the right
various
reasons.
spots. I think there were kind of a lot of people that said Okafor didn't have a great attitude in the NBA. I think he's a really good player, honestly, and I think he is starting to get a real foothold back in the NBA again.
Yes, that's why I said the right reasons. I remember he fought the one guy out in Philly and posted it on social media and got suspended for it.
Was it like a fan or something like that?
It was a heckler, I think, but I think they found out he was a fan. He didn't like Okafor. So it's like, oh my gosh.
Jahlil Okafor is 24 years old. I just want to put that out there.
See, he's in that realm where it's like you would think he's so much older than that just because it seems like he's been around forever. Well, he was one of the guys that blew up even in his freshman year in high school on the Peach Jam circuit.
He was, Jahlil Okafor, he was a highly rated recruit for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
He was, I don't remember what school he went to in Chicago and what, AAU team he played for, just because there's so many great teams and great AAU groups that come out of, Illinois and the Chicago area. But
he played
Jahlil Okafor, him. There was a decent storyline, him and Cliff Alexander kind of battling for being the top player in the country for at least a time. And Okafor ended up going to Duke, and Cliff Alexander ended up going to Kansas. That was another really weird career in college basketball. Cliff Alexander was. I don't really know whatever happened to him, honestly.
Cliff Alexander, oh my gosh. Dude, Cliff Alexander fell off the face of the earth for one. Number 3 recruit in the 2014 class. Best known to people outside of Kansas as the Jackwagon, because it went viral. What happened was, and by the way, Okafor went to Whitney Young, which Whitney Young's really good. But Khalil
was Alexander a Morgan Park player? I don't remember, but
I can't remember.
We're talking like Chicago high school basketball here. This is an obscure subject, but continue.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, Jabari Parker, Chicago recruit, not Austin Rivers, but you get my gist. Chicago's had some pretty good players. AD, but Duke's actually kind of surprisingly made that a big pipeline of theirs. As Duke leads with 24 with a minute to go.
Alexander played at Curie High School, if you were curious.
HP, my 25-point prediction could come true as Jack White with the dunk. No, actually, Jahlil Okafor had an offer from DePaul when he was in the 8th grade. I don't know if you knew that.
And we like that, folks.
But Cliff Alexander, it came down to Illinois and Kansas for him.
Okay, I know where you're going with this. I remember that video. I think that is hilarious because if you're that into a high school player's recruitment, you should probably relax a little bit. That was hilarious. Owning the Illinois fans. I remember the people flipping off the screen and everything. That was hilarious.
Because he went to reach for the Illinois hat and then pulled his hand back.
Yes, I remember that. It was pretty funny. I'm not saying I would do that personally, but it was pretty funny to watch the reaction there.
People flipped out.
Oh, they did. I still remember that.
I'm like, you've got... Oh my gosh, HP, my 25-point prediction is going to come true. Let's go.
Still, this is the closest game we've covered so far, for the record.
Oh, jeez. But yeah, I remember that. That was one of the most volatile recruiting battles I've ever seen.
Hilarious. I remember that. Like people flipping off a random high school basketball player, Cliff Alexander on TV. I still remember that was hilarious. All right, Duke wins.
Duke wins. Let's go, Duke. Come on, Duke.
We have successfully distracted you from actually watching this game. Who was the leading scorer? I know Vernon Carey.
Vernon Carey had a double-double with 19 and 14. Wendell Moore with 15, 8, and 5 for the Blue Devils. On the other side, Nate Kennel leads Bradley with 13 and Darryl Brown with 10. HP, do you have any parting words on this Sunday night for the TNS patrons before we log off here?
Yeah, I got nothing. Recruiting was an interesting story to talk about, at least for this this segment of HP and Landon talk live stream the tournament and attempt to talk about things over the blowout. But that was a pretty good prediction. 25 points was right on the money. I had 33 for this one, so I was.
You're not off. You're not off
that much. Off, but once again, this is the 5th blowout we've covered. This is the closest game we've covered, also at 25 points.
Well, that's going to do it for us here at the Neutral Site, folks. If you liked our work here, subscribe to our YouTube page. It means a lot to us. Check us out on our Twitter at Neutral Site Show. Where we'll have more games. HP and I will be covering Illinois Marquette tomorrow in a solid 7-10 matchup. We'll have 3.
That should be a pretty good game, I do have to say. I think that'll be a close game.
I'm excited about that one. Along with Hutch and Huber, you can catch them at capital H Hutch, capital H Huber, Hutch and Huber. They've been awesome with us. I can't speak highly enough about their work. They've had some great games and some pretty big upsets over there if you want to check out their episodes. And once again, we are a proud Big Heads Media podcast, and unless
even when we're not podcasting,
even when we're not podcasting, even though we are not podcasting right now, we're a proud live stream. I don't know, whatever, but we'll be back tomorrow with 3 games, 3 total, and until then, stay safe and stay neutral. We'll see you all soon. Have a great night.